The Sustainable Voice, bringing you big successes from small places worldwide.
Welcome back, Leigh. How's it going?
Hi, Ashish. I'm glad to be here with you today.
I'm telling you, I'm so excited. We've been talking about money and talking about the IMF, and I think I don't know if it's that I don't know if I love picking fights or if I can't tell what it is. But I seem to have a lot of fun when we start calling out organizations who just don't see what the obvious is.
Yeah. You like to rage against the machine,
Oh,
I
that's really
think.
good. Oh, that's
Yeah.
good. Oh, that's good. That's good. That's good.
I
We're
think that's
gonna
it.
we're gonna be paying a nickel every time we say that now. I'm like, that's
Oh, are
played
we?
now.
Oh, shoot, really? Because the other one I was going to say is, what was that song? Where was that from? Money makes the world go round. Money makes the world go round. Do you remember
Well,
that song?
I do remember that song. I don't remember who sings it
Was it
though.
in a musical?
I think so. I think it is. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I stir the pot. I really am.
you're a pot stirrer. You
Yeah.
can't help it.
I guess that makes me a Gilmore girl. At least I'm not a Kardashian. That's fine.
Yeah, I was gonna say our last episode we were raging on the Kardashians.
Caging on the Kardashians. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a whole bunch of names for them, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you know what it is. I mean, we've called out ambassadors in countries. We've called out tourism ambassadors. We've called people out, and for the record, our viewer base, our listener base has been increasing tenfold every single time. It's been increasing rapidly, and I find it ironic and I find it funny that not one person that we have challenged has come on the show
Hmm.
and had that conversation. We're not here to attack them, right? I mean, I'm not trying to be mean to them. We're not here to attack them. But when people who, we've talked about them, the voices, right? This podcast is about finding big successes in small places. And it's about helping people in need and about the voiceless. When those people are paying the price for, frankly, decisions made on incomplete information or self-inflicted punishment, that's where I have a problem. That's where I have a real problem. And we as a society, and we've been talking about the IMF, we cannot be so rigid in how we approach fragile economies that we don't see what's happening. It shouldn't take a PhD in economics to turn the conversation around to be able to have a fair shot at paying back loans, right? There has to be an open dialogue, and there has to be something that leads us in the right direction, and that's what we were getting to in the last episode, I think, right?
That's what we were getting to is really how does this happen? How can what is your vision for for change?
Well, my vision is one that's partly mine, partly borrowed from others, partly borrowed from people that are obviously, as I said, are much smarter, that are in the know, whose opinion frankly matters, right?
Hmm.
Quite so often we just politicize these things, right? We politicize this, and oh well, this country gets more than the other country and whatnot. I think Argentina wrote the book on how to deal with the IMF, and I
Hmm.
think other countries have to follow suit in terms of that. I really do.
Yeah.
When you think about banks. Think about the financial crisis of '08, right? What brought the banking industry to its knee completely in '08, '09? What's the one thing that everybody stopped paying
Oh
all
my
in
God,
unison?
they're mortgages.
There you go. What if
Yeah.
every country in the world just stopped paying back their loans? I'm not saying they should, but I'm simply saying we're heading in that direction. What if every country just said, okay, here are the keys to the country, I'm done.
Yeah, but so what if they stop? What if everybody stopped paying? Wouldn't everybody then still be on an even keel? I
Yeah,
mean,
but then
but
but
no one
the
would be saddled with debt.
right. I mean, they're still be saddled,
But
but good luck collecting it.
right.
Right? What are you going to do? We're going to put austerity measures and we're going to put tariffs on. Okay, you were going to do that anyway. We're going to put we're going to put your economy into shambles. Cool, you're already doing that anyway.
Hmm.
We're going to make sure that you have a hard time making money. All right, you're already doing that anyway. We're going to make sure that no country ever trades with you ever again. Good luck with that. Right? The International Monetary Fund and organizations like it were designed at the onset to be a trustworthy organization to help fragile economies. Again, the financial minds in the world who are geeking out right now, throwing things at my face. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm generalizing it because I only have a half hour to describe this.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the same organization that is giving money to Pakistan, to giving money to Ukraine, to giving money to Egypt, to Argentina, to Colombia, to Kenya, down the road. The same organization that's giving money to everybody. The World Bank is just like them. But until there's some level of compassion in how they work, until that occurs, you're going to see third-party lenders like a China, like in India, like Indonesia, which is coming soon. They're going to become a lender pretty soon too. They're already a top 10 economy, in terms of where they're trending. You're going to see individual countries using loans to fragile economies as a source of interest income.
Wow.
Think about that, right?
Yeah.
The amount of money that China, and I am not villainizing China. Please, 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 I want to stress that. I am not villainizing, but I'm just simply stating the fact that China has given out more loans, or actually as many loans as the IMF has. Right? It's a pretty close figure. Think about the interest income on those loans. It's a line item on their P&L statement.
Yeah.
It is a source of revenue in a P&L statement.
Mm-hmm.
This is the second largest economy in the world. Right? This is a line item. India is one of the top 5 economies in the world. The money that they're loaning is now a line item on their economy. Mm-hmm. Who's next? It's right. Indonesia. Who's next? It's not the power brokers that used to be, and that's the thing that's very important, right? When you and I were in school, we were taught superpowers, right? Soviet Union used to be Soviet Union. Russia was a superpower. The U.S. is a superpower. UK is a superpower. How many of the top 10 economies in the world now reside in Asia?
Oh, wow. I don't know, but I bet you do. Do you know?
India's there. Indonesia's there. Vietnam is approaching there. India is on track to be a top 3 economy within the end of the decade. Japan's already lost place. Mm-hmm. UK's already lost place. Germany's going to lose place. They are going to be the number 1 economy in the world by 2050.
Wow.
Think about that. Indonesia is a top 12 economy. It is going to be in the top 5 within the next 10 years.
That's wild.
Now think about this. Indonesia is the leading source of nickel, one of the leading sources of nickel in the world, right? Mm-hmm. We're all going to and this is a sidebar, but just I want to draw this scenario out for you, okay? We're all shifting to electric cars and this push for electric cars and hybrid cars and lithium batteries and nickel batteries and everything else. Indonesia is the leading provider of nickel. Argentina and Chile are one of the leading providers of lithium. If those countries all say, you know what, you're not getting our lithium, you're not getting our nickel, what happens to the production of electric cars in the world?
Right. They're holding all the cards.
It's like OPEC cutting production tenfold.
Yep.
Right? I mean, it's a sidebar, but I don't know that these organizations fully understand. I think they still think they're holding the gun. They're not. Mm-hmm. They just have their hand cocked back on the trigger like this. They're not. It's the countries that they can't see are the ones who actually hold the power. It is a paradigm shift that my professor talked about when I was a freshman and a sophomore in college. My background's in finance and international economics. It is what my professors talked about in the end of the 90s, right? At the turn of the millennium. They talked about this paradigm shift where the superpowers of the world were no longer going to be in the West. They're coming out of Asia. Mm-hmm. Here we are.
Yeah.
China, India, Vietnam, Indonesia. That's 4 of the top 10.
Wow.
Or top 15, rather. 4.
Interesting.
And they're going to be 4 of the top 10 pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
China and India, that's 2 of the top 5. Right? I'm not even counting Japan because they're sliding down the scale. Otherwise, we're talking about 3 of the top 5.
Yeah. So, are there any IMF success stories? Are there any countries that actually, can you recall any country that actually has taken money from the IMF and paid it back and now is thriving? And
not with the IMF, but with the World Bank. Yeah, India. India just signed on a $1.5 billion loan from the World Bank, and the loan is not for money because they can pay it back with their eyes closed. It is a $1.5 billion loan specifically for sustainable infrastructure building. So wind turbines. And I just came back from Central India. I have never seen so many wind turbines in my life, and made me so proud. But they're using this money to completely transform their infrastructure into a more sustainable one with solar panels, electric chargers, wind turbines. This is a country that had a hard time 30 years ago getting rickshaws to stop using kerosene for fuel. This is a town, and I remember one of the towns is called Rajkot, which is close to where my family comes from. Every time I go to this town, I would have a respiratory infection by the second day because of all the thick soot that was in the air. Right? I would have to cover, and sure enough, every time I would have a respiratory infection. Not a one this time. Not a one. It was perfectly fine.
Incredible.
It's still a long way to go, but they're shifting. So that's one that's a success story where they're borrowing money for the right reasons. They could pay it themselves, but they're borrowing money for the right reasons. They're literally borrowing money, and this is one reason, I'm sure one of many, but they're borrowing money to cycle money. Right? You're borrowing money from the World Bank. You have interest expense on your account now as well as a country. The money is now you're generating revenue for the World Bank through interest income. You're generating money for the World Bank. There's everything is. India doesn't need this loan. They can pay it back on their own easily. But they're the ones going to the World Bank and saying this is what it's for. That's a success story. A country going to the IMF, not in desperation, going to the World Bank, not in desperation, but going because they have an innovative idea, or they're looking to capacity build through innovation to be able to transform their infrastructure, transform their economy, transform their daily life, transform how they live and how they operate for the right reasons. Right? Imagine if Kenya. I'll use them as an example. Imagine if they weren't under the debt level they were. Imagine they went to the IMF and said, we would like to have the ability to use this money to create land conservation trusts within the communities in northern and eastern Kenya to be able to create land parcels where for every one acre we own, we want to give 3 acres back to indigenous communities. We would like your help to be able to help facilitate this and fund this. Okay, here you go. And I'll take it one step further, right? During the pandemic, the SBA in the US has the emergency disaster relief. Great program, right, for businesses in need. It's a 30-year loan at 3.75%. Right?
Yeah.
So if people in the US, who, by the way, they give these loans out without checking credit, without collateral, at 3.75%, that's to a citizen of the US. But so if that occurs there, but the same disaster relief that goes to countries carries a 16% interest rate or higher or lower and has more or less favorable terms. I'm not saying it needs to be 30 years, but it ends up being that long anyway.
Yeah.
You're not going to get paid back in 2 years. It doesn't happen.
Nope.
Right? That's just it. But so there are some great success stories. The way the IMF loans money, the World Bank loans money, this could be a powerful tool for good. Right? I want you to think about this for a second. And last episode, we talked about solutions. When you look at any economy, the best way to generate income to pay back loans, yeah, you can tax. That's not it, though. It's foreign investment. It's opening up to foreign investment of all kinds, and tourism being on top of that list, right? I know that there's, I want to say this real quickly because this is important, right? You see all the protests happening in Spain. About over tourism and in Italy. I get it. I want to remind all those listeners of the acronym PIGS, PIIGS, because 15 years ago, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain were pretty close to sinking the entire EU, if not for Germany bankrolling all their economies. They were all broke. Their economies were having to go through austerity measures and having to borrow money from the EU Central Bank, which was funded by Germany, to be able to pay back their loans, having to take strict austerity measures. Greece in particular, they had just severe austerity measures. And if you go back 15 years, how did they pay back their loans? Tourism. Over tourism is a problem. Yes, I understand. And so if you're protesting tourism, I understand over tourism, understanding misbehaving tourists, I understand all that. But if you are somebody who's living in Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, or Spain, who's today waking up and saying, I don't want tourists in this country. All right, cool. Let's go back 15 years and have you pay back Germany everything you owed them without that income. So that's the first solution.
Mhm.
Every country must understand and must help their citizens understand what their economic driver is. If you are Italy, if you are Spain, if you are Greece, you can say that your driver is exports of X, Y, and Z. You're kidding yourself. It's tourism. It's tourism. You can tell yourself all you want to in Italy that it's wine or it's cars. No, it's tourism. You can tell yourself all you want to in Greece that it's everything else, agriculture and whatnot. Last time I checked, the part of the
Yeah.
right. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it comes down to. So the first solution, and this we talked about in previous episodes, is a direct and indirect connection to tourism, and a direct indirect connection to your leading economic driver. Every country should understand their leading economic driver, and I don't know that every country does. Right? Just like we talked about the fact that during the pandemic, most countries were not able to calculate the aggregate contribution tourism made to their economy. That's why countries like Ecuador went from 12.5% unemployment to 62% in 3 months. Right? And it had nothing to do with Ecuador doing wrong, but the people who asked them to close their borders didn't understand the contribution or didn't understand what the key driver was.
Mm-hmm.
You treated every country, whether your key driver was agriculture or tourism, the exact same way, and it doesn't work like that. So not just the countries, but every country. So think about this, okay? Every country has to have their key driver nailed down, and everybody who lives in that country should understand that key driver. Now, if you are a country borrowing money from the IMF or the World Bank, I'm using India as an example, right? Tourism is not a major driver for India. In its best year, tourism represented 1% of GDP. It is not a major driver for their economy, and they understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It is exports, it is tech, it is agriculture, it is everything else, not tourism.
Mm-hmm.
And they understood that. Why do you think they went to the World Bank and said, we want $1.5 billion loan? And this is essentially what's happening, right? A country goes to the World Bank and the IMF, I need $1.5 billion or $5 billion or $3 billion or $10 billion. What for? I can't pay my bills. I need this and I'm having trouble. And we're in severe debt crisis and Or simply, what do you need the money for? I don't know. I just want it.
Yeah.
India went and said, we are transitioning into a sustainable economy.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be a leading vision for clean energy. This is a country that back in the early 2000s was actually opening up their borders for power plants to be built. And the US was coming this, oh, we're going to help you build a nuclear plant and help you build this. And none of it happened.
Mm.
And now this country is putting in wind turbines, solar panels, clean energy, every which way they're going. Is it perfect? Of course not. But they have committed themselves that they're making this movement. They went to the World Bank with a purpose in mind. This is what we want.
Yeah.
Now imagine if every country, whether you're in despair or not, if a country like Kenya went to the IMF and said, dear IMF, I need $3 billion. You shut my economy for 6 months because of the pandemic. You didn't understand what was going to happen to my economy. You made me, you turned my economy off. Unemployment went down went up to near 70%. I need to rebuild my economy and I need your help to do it. I need favorable terms. I can't pay you back at 16%, 18%, 20% interest, even 8% interest. I need 3% interest. I need the loan to be forgiven at a certain point. I need it to be termed out. I need it to have these kinds of terms favorable here. My currency is being devalued. If you come on and just saddle on debt, my currency is going to collapse and I'm not going to be able to pay you back. I need to be able to go through and have these steps in place. And by the way, I'm doing it. My leading driver in my economy is tourism. Services sector makes like 60% of my business. You shut off my economy. That's why people lost their jobs. I want to give these people their jobs back. I need your help to do it. I need you to give me a longer term to pay it back. I need your help to pay it back. I need you to work with me on these loans so that I can actually be able to keep my country afloat without having to go to other countries to borrow money to pay you back. I don't want to pay from Peter to rob Paul. I want to open up my country for foreign investment, but I can't do it if I don't have stability. And I can't have stability if I have high unemployment. I can't do it if I have a faltering currency. I can't do it if I'm floating euro bonds and other bonds all over the place to raise money just to pay your interest. And I certainly can't do it if every cent I get, I'm spending almost 100% on interest payments instead of building my infrastructure and taking care of my teachers and my police officers and whatnot. Can you work with me? IMF will say yes or no. Fantastic. Oh, you can't? Okay, great. World Bank, here's the same conversation. China, here's the same conversation. India, here's the same conversation. Both people go in eyes open. Now, I understand that people looking, well, that already happens. I don't think so. Because if it does, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah. It just seems like a no-brainer, honestly. But as you described that, what's going on in Kenya versus, I mean, obviously India's got a lot more prosperity and they're in a different
space.
They're in a different space, but
Mhm.
India's almost, is entrepreneurial
Sure.
and running their country like a business, as you've described it, and Kenya's more just trying to survive. I don't even know that they can. It sounds like they can't even get out of the weeds enough to be entrepreneurial. But maybe I'm misreading that.
Take Argentina. Take Argentina as an example. Right? Take Argentina.
Yeah.
Up until this point, the conversation I just explained to you hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
They would take the money and default, take the money and default. The last president was allowing other currencies to now work in to actually be circulated, like Chinese yuan circulated in the banks, right? This president went to the IMF and said, you want your money back, all 32 billion plus interest. I can't pay you unless you let me do my job. We're going to restructure this because we're a unionized country. It hasn't worked for 70 years. You haven't been paid for 7 years. I've been defaulted 9 times. I will default the 10th time. Nothing new there. You're gonna end up giving me money again because the West has so much money invested in Argentina, that you're gonna have to give me the money again. Rather than doing that, I want to work with you. This is my economy. Yes, tourism is a major part of it. I want to deregulate the airline industry and I want to actually allow other airlines to come in. I want to go to a dollar-denominated economy or something like a dollar-denominated economy. I want to actually sink my currency to be able to actually eliminate the black market so I can actually solve the US dollar foreign currency shortage that I have in my country. I want to be able to have people that have an economy that actually shows a budget surplus instead of running a deficit every time. I can't do that if I'm paying you interest payments at unreasonable rates every single time. So my predecessors have defaulted. They just haven't been able to explain to you what I just explained to you. I'm telling you right now. And the best part he had is, by the way, I have a PhD in economics. And before you explain anything to me, just know I already know what you're going to say. Right? So it has nothing to do with party. He was specific. And what happened? Debt got restructured. Argentina is showing a surplus. Yes, there's still problems. He's deregulating the industry to allow more airlines to come in. There's once this goes through, you're going to see tons of foreign investment coming into Argentina.
And tourism opportunities and all kinds of great.
Nelson Mandela gave this speech. Did you ever watch Invictus with Morgan Freeman?
No, I need to watch it. Yeah.
You need to watch this. We talked about this in his podcast, but even before the movie, you have to go back, just YouTube his speech at the United Nations. This was in 1995 or 6, I think. No, 1994. It was shortly after he took over president. The country was just, it was in shambles. They are where a lot of these countries are right now, right? They could not pay their bills, could not pay their teachers, could not pay anybody. And one of the things that she literally came out and you think about this, right? In terms of the conversation and where they were and what they said, the conversation shifted. They started understanding what they were about, right? Just in that speech, Nelson Mandela said 3 key things. Invest in our country. We want you to invest in our country. Visit South Africa. We are a beacon for what could be. Please come and visit. Come and invest in our country. Come and see our country. And three, accept us into the global stage. That was 1994. Fast forward to today. Yes, there's still issues. However, BMW, Mercedes, Land Rover all have plants building cars in South Africa that are now shipped to everywhere else in the continent.
Mm.
That is the hub. How much foreign investment you think is coming out of that country besides tourism? Right? But tourism is still the driver.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I was in Rwanda in Tanzania, and the president, Rwanda, excuse me, in October, and the president of Tanzania, she's the first female president in the history of the country. I love listening to her. Forget her politics. I love listening to her.
Mm-hmm.
What did she say? It was like she watched that speech. She opened up and she said, invest in Tanzania. We want your money in our country. This is a country that during the first part of the pandemic, her predecessor died in office after telling everybody that, basically that, the pandemic wasn't real. Drink hot water tonight. I was in Tanzania when he died.
Oh, I remember that, but they said he
Yeah.
wasn't there, right?
He was in Kenya.
Yeah.
And we went from a country saying we don't want vaccines, right? I'm not an anti-vaxxer, I'm not talking about that crowd, right? But a country that was shunned by the international societies and community saying these guys aren't serious. They don't document the unemployment rate. They listed unemployment at 1.5%, which is obviously not right.
Mm-hmm.
But they did that. And then you start thinking about what they have, start thinking about how they were. And she came in office. She took over after her predecessor passed away.
Mm.
And the first thing she did was put Tanzania back on the map in a positive light. The New York Times did a whole cover story on her. Are there problems? Of course. However, look at where she was. And she was on that stage and she said, invest in our country. This is what we want.
Mm.
So how can you have that conversation if you don't have stability? How can you have stability if you are spending more in paying off interest than you are in infrastructure? It's not that complicated to understand.
Yeah.
And it's not like the IMF is going broke tomorrow.
Right.
Right? I mean, it would be one thing that I would say, well, if you don't pay back your payment, then, we're going to be out of business. That's not what's happening.
Right.
Right? So
Yeah.
flex your muscle for the right reasons. So that's the second solution, is flex your muscles for the right reasons. That's what that professor was talking about, Professor Bradlow. There must be independent oversight of the IMF. We have The Hague, right? The International Criminal Court in The Hague. And we have that. Whether they have teeth or not is a separate discussion. But we have oversight for how rogue states behave.
Yeah.
But we don't have oversight on how an international organization is loaning money. You said it best the last episode, predatory lending at best.
Mm-hmm.
You can't pay the bills? Oh, here, sign here. Don't speak English? Sign here.
I was just looking up. I didn't realize the parent organization for the IMF is the United Nations.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Did you see what year it was formed?
Yes, in the 30s.
Mm-hmm. What was
Well,
happening?
1944 says in the aftermath of the Great Depression of the 30s. So.
And what else in 44? What was happening in that time of year?
Oh God. Well, that was World War II, right?
Right.
Hitler. And...
It was designed to help the world rebuild after a devastating war that had decimated economies world. It was designed to help Germany rebuild, to help Italy rebuild, to help Japan rebuild, to help every country from Poland to England and otherwise rebuild. A central organization everybody paid into to pool their money that was then allowed to have these countries rebuild.
Sounds like they're gangsters now.
Right. There was oversight because it was designed with the right intentions. There was oversight because the United Nations created it as a means, as a vehicle. The United Nations isn't really involved in those discussions, the IMF, anymore.
Really?
It has become more independent than it needs to be. There is very little oversight. There must be an independent body. Right now, whoever gives the most money, essentially, and this is simplifying it, I know, but whoever gives the most money is allowed to call the shots.
Wow.
There must be you have a World Health Organization, an independent body. Correct or not, you still have one. You have the
Yeah.
International Criminal Court. You have NATO. You have the UN. You have the South Asian Alliance. Why don't you have a body that's overseeing international lending?
Yeah.
It was there. What happened?
Mm.
How did we get from helping fragile economies rebuild to this? That's why, take the IMF aside, that's why the World Bank was sitting in September saying, we're going to help fragile economies. And we're going, you're too late.
Yeah.
Dumbasses. Yeah. I mean that's it. So you talked about this, right? So the first one is oversight.
Yes.
The second one is allowing favorable terms, understanding the country actually going to whatever body they're borrowing from and saying, this is what drives my economy. It's broken. I need your help to fix it, but I can't do it if you're going to charge me 10% interest. These are my terms. I can afford this. If you can't pay me this, I'm going to go to somebody who can.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. The third aspect is foreign investment. Right? If you have the first two, then open up your country for foreign investment. And that starts with tourism. I'm not talking about over tourism. I'm talking about sustainable tourism and understanding it. If it's not a driver in your economy, it's not a driver in your economy. Fine. No problem, right?
Yeah.
But if it's a driver in your economy, accept it. Embrace it. Understand how it powers your economy and then use that to build your economy the right way. Regulate it. Right? So it's not just people coming and just dumping trash everywhere. Tourists should behave properly. I'm not talking about over tourism. Right? So we talked about earlier. If you want to control tourism instead of over tourism, charge more. So it remains a privilege, not a right. Charge more. Beyond that, there has to be this avenue where people are actually, you're going to government bodies or to lending bodies and have a clear understanding the way Argentina did, the way India does, the way, the way even, I would even say Ukraine does.
Mm-hmm.
That conversation with the Minister of Tourism for Ukraine was probably one of the most inspiring conversations I've ever had. She was a deputy minister or something, but she was laser focused. She said, we are focusing on the aftermath. And although she didn't say it, I would have to believe that they know that this bill is coming due for 9 billion plus interest. Yeah. And they know that they're not going to just be able to say, oh, the war's over. Great. Turn it back on so we can go ahead and pay the bills. They understand that they're not going to look the same.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to ever be the same or look the same. And tourism was starting to really get going before this started. And that's what they're going to probably restart first, because they know that people want to come there and see Ukraine like they were before.
Yeah.
They have a clear understanding of what drives them. I mean, Pakistan got 7 billion out of the IMF because it simply said, well, if you don't fund us, we're going to be a failed state, and good luck with that. I mean, 7 billion out of the IMF. You better give us money or else. That was essentially the conversation.
When was this?
Years ago.
Yeah.
Decades ago.
Yeah.
Decades ago. Who's your prime minister? We don't know. We assassinated the last two. But give us money or else. I mean,
this is quite complicated.
But
one of the articles, and I was digging and following the links of from your piece in LinkedIn on, Onward, and one of the studies suggested that there needs to be even criteria, for and measurements within the IMF for how they evaluate, these countries' ability to repay, and then milestones for, the payment process and all that. So it sounds like it's not like we've already talked about it. It's not even right. There's not an even playing field for everybody.
No, there isn't. And that's because of there's a lack of understanding on both sides, right? The IMF understanding who they're loaning to, and the people borrowing being able to articulate properly what they need the money for.
Right.
Besides desperation.
And how they plan to pay it back. And
right.
What
they can and what they can imagine if you ran your business like this.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you need the money for? I don't know. Here you go.
Just give it to me.
Just give it to me. Give it to me or else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to put a gun to your head, and Pakistan saying, don't worry, our gun's bigger. I mean,
When this is kind of little sort of it's related, but it's not IMF. I mean, but I guess it kind of is. But Kenya, so I'm wondering, like, if, with the citizens being the possibility of being taxed so much more, are you starting to hear about things like increases in poaching and different things like that at
not
all?
yet, not
Hmm.
yet. But if you start seeing a fall off in tourism because the protests drive away tourism, which hasn't happened yet, then
Hmm.
you will.
Okay.
Then you win. So that's the thing that you have to pay attention to. Is the fact that it's there. It will happen, right? But now imagine if you are Kenya, if you are South Africa, if you're Tanzania, if you're this. Imagine if you go to the IMF, World Bank, whoever, and say, if we can't stay stable for tourists to come in, this is what's going to happen. Poaching is going to be on the increase. We're going to have unemployment on the rise. We're going to have everything else. We're going to devolve into a failed economy. We need your help. If you're Egypt, if you're going to the IMF and saying we have a foreign currency crisis, I need money to be able to have our economy solved. By the way, we rely on tourism. 1 in 6 jobs comes from tourism. And have you seen our neighbors? We
Right.
need this money to stay stable because tourism for us is not something that's going to be consistent. When it's high, it's really high. When it's low, it's really low. And there's
Hmm.
nothing in the middle. Unfortunately, with the only country like this, and because the artifacts we have in our country, it is always going to be like that. So we're trying to avoid a foreign currency crisis. We need to build new airports and new roads and be able to showcase a strong infrastructure because of the history of we are the dawn of civilization is in our country. We want to showcase it right. Tourism is what drives our economy. And oh, by the way, tourism is the largest leading cause of leading employer of women. So which
Mm.
means we're also have a separate benefit happening here as well. We've been through 10 years of an Arab Spring, 10 years of protest and revolution and whatnot that zapped our economy. We're rebuilding it. We need time to rebuild it, but we need your help to do it. This is what we can afford. This is what we need to do. This is why we're doing it. And by the way, had you seen our neighbors? We need an exit clause. That way, in case we can't pay back these loans because of the Suez Canal, because of this, because of that, items we don't have any control over. We will do our best to
Yeah.
control peace, but we need favorable terms. We then understand the geopolitics of where we're located. Please give it to us. And what happened, right? Yeah, Egypt got money from the IMF. They still had a foreign currency crisis. They now have taken money from China and India. You think the IMF is going to get the money back? That loan is 3% of their economy.
Wow.
You think they're going to get the money back? I mean, it's not difficult.
I think you need to be a loan broker.
Oh God, no.
Why not? You'd be
I,
great at it.
I would love to be able to be a consultant. I just want to be in the room.
Yeah.
I want to be in the room and just be able to help identify what these countries need to borrow. Look, what borrowing for. And I know it's a complicated process, but the
Mhm.
one thing that the IMF has forgotten, and this is the fourth solution. When they were first created, they were the only game in town.
Mm.
They are not the only game in town anymore. So if they don't give the money, somebody else will, and that somebody else may not be a person or a player we like.
Yeah.
You think
A
about
good
this.
point.
You think about this. You're talking about weaponizing loans. You're
Mm-hmm.
talking about weaponizing international loans. It's not. It's not reasonable. Not reasonable.
No.
So
Wow.
we have 4 solutions drawn out here that people have to pay attention to. If you're a finance professional listening in and you have insight on this, please join us on an episode and share further insight. We'll create a separate episode for this and have further insight. I would love to be able to have this, to have further insight. To say, well, come on and tell us. Look, it's not that easy. Great, then tell us why it's not that easy. Maybe we can make it easier. Help our
Mhm.
listeners understand why this is happening because it is happening. So clearly, if we don't understand it, we're not the only ones that don't understand it.
Mhm.
So we need to pay attention to that.
Well, if you don't understand it,
We got
then I'm
problems.
sure that we do. Because you
Well,
understand a lot. So,
I read a lot. I listen to people
yeah.
who understand a lot, and because of them, I understand a lot.
Hmm.
So there's that. So
Yeah.
uh, so
That's awesome. All right. Well, next time, are we talking? I was thinking about I know what our next topic is, but the tie-in, this next topic, this country has done a lot to foster tourism and
Mhm.
understanding how important it is to their economy. Maybe more so, I would argue, than any other developing country in the world.
And they're at a crossroads right now because their economy is faltering.
Mm.
And they're at a crossroads right now. And absolutely right. You've nailed it. See,
Yeah.
it's not that complicated. You got it.
Yeah, I got it. So Costa Rica, that's where we're headed
That's
next.
where we're heading next. We're gonna have a guest. We're gonna have a guest with us too.
I'm
When we do
excited.
Costa Rica, it's gonna be really cool. It'll be
Yeah.
really cool. So
All right.
till next time. It's going to be great. But to our listeners, I have to just share. Thanks for listening to our voice. Thanks for listening to what we believe in, which is small successes and big successes in small places. Rather, I botched that one up. So yeah, thanks for listening to us. I mean, our voice is really important. We're trying to give a voice to the voiceless and what we believe in. We hope this podcast helps you find your voice. Make an impact in somebody else's life because of the voice that you now have. Use this podcast to empower your voice. Use this podcast to empower those around you to make a difference. Create your own big success.
Thank you for listening to The Sustainable Voice. If you have a success story of your own, please reach out and share it with us. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.